Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Anna, and I'm with the New Mexico Small Business Development Center. Today, we have Eric Spellmann, a public speaker guru, will be presenting NFTs. What are they, and how can your business profit? I am asking myself the same thing, so I'm excited for this one. We'll be using the Q&A function to take questions and welcome attendee participation. So don't hesitate to ask us any questions that you may have. Definitely don't be shy. We love questions. We'll answer those during and at the end of the webinar. Thanks so much for joining us. And without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Eric.
Thank you very much. Oh, this topic, I swear, I get more questions about it. And I feel like when I answer for someone, sometimes they're still like, so my goal with this, because we have enough time here to do this, is to make sure that you understand it. And trust me, this could be the next big thing, or it could be a big waste of your money. It's hard to say, but let's get to it, because I'm here to tell you there are a lot of people who are making a lot of money on it right now. Let's dive into it, and that way you can either choose to do it or at least impress people at parties by knowing what it means. So what is an NFT? Okay, it stands for, and this is the part where you can impress people at parties, it stands for a non-fungible token. Okay, now you're probably saying, Eric, that didn't answer the question. All you did was tell me what the letters stand for, but I still don't know what it is. Well, non-fungible simply means unique, non-replaceable. There's no two. There's no two like it. Okay, it's not like, it's kind of like the Mona Lisa versus the dollar. That's the easiest way to think of it. You know, the Mona Lisa is a one-of-a-kind painting. There's no two of them. And whereas a dollar is easily replaced, and it's worth what? $1. You know, if $1 gets lost, I can get another dollar, and it's worth exactly the same as that dollar. Okay, so an NFT is something that is completely unique. It is non-replaceable, but it's digital. And that's the difference. You know, a Mona Lisa painting is something that you can pick up, you can grab, you can hang on your wall. Not that we could ever do that with a real Mona Lisa, but it is a real thing that you can touch. And so some people will be nervous about this, going, well, wait a minute, Eric, you're saying it's something digital, like this PowerPoint or even this video of you talking. You know, it's not something I can touch. It's on a computer. So the real key is, how do we prove uniqueness? Okay. I mean, think about this. The New Mexico SBDC could sell this video as an NFT. Anything digital is an NFT, but once again, the question is, how do we prove that what you're buying gives you ownership of that video? I mean, videos can be copied, right? Well, the way they do it is through blockchain. Now, we talked about this. Remember when we had that talk about cryptocurrency and how all of that works? Well, I'm going to explain that again a little bit, because some of you didn't get it the first time. And also, it's confusing as heck. It really is. And I try to explain it in a non-technical way. Ethereum, which I just love saying anyway, it's just fun to say. But Ethereum is a form of cryptocurrency. It's a form of money, okay? Kind of like Bitcoin. It's just like Bitcoin, just a different company. It's probably the second biggest one out there after Bitcoin, to be honest with you. And the way that Bitcoin money or Ethereum money works, you know, and if it's digital, how come we can't just all, you know, duplicate it, you know, counterfeit it, make all the Bitcoin we want since it's digital? Well, the reason you can't is because of something called blockchain, okay? Now, blockchain means this. Now, stay with me. You have this. You got this. It's not going to go over your head. When I make a purchase with Bitcoin, let's say I have one Bitcoin, which is worth a lot, like $40,000. But let's say I have one Bitcoin. And I go and buy a car with it, okay? What happens is that transaction, the proof of me selling that Bitcoin to whoever I bought the car from, that transaction gets copied all over the internet, you know, on this blockchain. Like you have a blockchain, I have other people's transactions on my blockchain. And if you have a blockchain, you have other people's transactions on yours. And because it's copied around the internet, it becomes very difficult to counterfeit, because you would basically have to go and find and replace at the exact same moment in time. I mean, it's next to impossible is what I'm saying, is because it's copied out there a whole bunch of times. So if I try to counterfeit it, say, hey, I still have my Bitcoin, even though I bought a car with it. Oh, I really still have it. The internet would go, no, you don't. See, we have a approved transaction over thousands of computers all around the internet that say you don't have that Bitcoin anymore. That's what a blockchain is. It's like, you remember the old adding machines? These, some of you really ought to perk up now. You remember the old adding machines that had the little tape that came out the top? Blockchain is just like that. It's like that little tape that comes out the top. It's like proof of what you just did, proof of what you just added. It's evidence, or as the kids today say, it's your receipts. It's proof that you made a transaction. And so a blockchain is like that tape, but everyone has a copy of it. Now, you're probably thinking, you mean everyone will see every transaction I've done, like exactly what I bought at Walmart? No, it's not like that. It's like you have this thing called a wallet, okay? And the wallet is encrypted and it has its own code, and no one but you knows that wallet. And you have a password, you better not lose it, because it's your only way into your wallet, where your Bitcoins or your Ethereum or your whatever is. And so what happens is it transfers from the wallet with your password and your permission, obviously, to someone else's wallet. Okay. So there's really no personal information connected to it. It's whoever's controlling the wallet. And so it's not that everyone out there knows that you bought a car with your Bitcoin. It's that a transaction for one Bitcoin occurred from this wallet to that wallet. And it's all encrypted anyway. So it works really good. And I think you're going to see a lot of cryptocurrency take off. So you're saying, well, Eric, what does cryptocurrency have to do with NFTs? Well, remember, with NFTs, we have to prove that you own something. I mean, if I sell you something, there's got to be, well, as the kids say today, receipts. Okay, there's got to be proof that I own it. And the only way to do that is to guarantee that someone can't copy that exactly. And so the transaction of me buying something, buying an NFT, occurs on the Ethereum network, which is, like I said, Bitcoin. They just adjusted the Ethereum blockchain to be able to handle buying and selling stuff like that. So that's basically how we prove uniqueness, and it works great. You can buy NFTs on other networks, but Ethereum is the big one. Okay. So what are some NFT examples? Well, basically anything digital. I mean, folks, you can sell anything digital. You could sell music. Let's say you write music. Well, you could come up with music and you could sell your music as an NFT. Digital art is big, and I mean big. If you're an artist and you're putting your stuff out there and there's no takers, well, many times you can, create it as an NFT, because here's the deal. With an NFT, someone actually proves that they own it. Whereas before, they don't know that you're not selling 1,000 copies of it. Now, with an NFT, you can sell 1,000 copies, don't get me wrong, but it has to remain unique. So they might be 1,000 numbered copies. And obviously, the more copies of something you sell, the less rare it is. Okay, so the less money it's worth. If you're only going to be selling one of them, then it'll be worth more money. Videos can be sold, even pieces of video. I mean, some guy actually was selling pieces of a video. I don't even remember what it was now. A video he made that was kind of stupid in my opinion, but he sold pieces of it, and he sold one piece for like $20,000. But that person owns that piece. You can even sell tweets. Like I said, you can sell emails, you can sell tweets, you can sell anything. Jack Dorsey, the creator of Twitter, he sold his first tweet for $3.9 million. The first tweet that was ever made on Twitter, he sold it, because he's the creator of it, for $3.9 million. And I think the tweet simply said, getting my Twitter going, something dumb like that. But the point was, he sold it. So anything digital can be sold. And using the Ethereum network, using blockchain, is how we can make sure that there is proof that you actually own it. Like I said, the big people who are making the money today are pretty much digital artists, like doing what you're seeing here on my screen, creating digital art, because back in the old days, they had no way to really prove that someone owned it, but now they do. And so digital art is becoming quite the big thing, but it's not limited to just that kind of art. You can buy all sorts of things. So what are the legalities of it? I mean, what's to keep me from copying a picture? Can it still be copied? NFTs do not stop people from copying things, okay? But what it does is it gives you legal proof that you own it. So keep in mind, if I made a piece of digital art and I put it on Facebook and 1 million people grab it, start posting it, putting it everywhere, and all that, does it mean I don't own it? No, I still own it. But I choose whether to go after those people. So what if I sell that piece of art? Yes, I can sell that piece of art to someone as an NFT. Once again, does that stop people from copying it, putting it all over the internet? No, but that person who owns it now does have the ability, if they want, to try to enforce their copyright. Okay, they could try to enforce their copyright on that piece because they technically own it. Does that make sense? Just because someone owns something doesn't keep people from physically copying. I mean, that's why we would have so many people in the past, copy VHS tapes, So, I mean, it doesn't stop people from physically doing it. It just gives them legal recourse if they choose to enforce it. Okay. So here we go. Also keep in mind, and this makes the legalities of it a tiny bit more complicated, but the artists themselves, even though they sell it, they can still retain the authorship. Okay. In other words, they can still say that they're the author. You don't have to sell everything. Like when you sell it, you can sell the fact that someone owns it, but they can't change it, or they can't claim to be the author. Does that make sense? So there's all different ways to do it. And a lot of it, if you're going to start selling your own NFTs, you probably ought to get a lawyer involved in looking at exactly what you're selling. Okay. Chances are you're going to be selling the right to display or to play and to claim ownership of, but you won't maybe sell the right to change it. You won't sell the right for them to claim that they're the author or the creator of it. Okay. It'd be like me buying a Monet, claiming I painted it. Well, that's kind of dumb, because if I claimed to paint it, it would be worth a lot less. But you see what I'm saying about the legalities. Keep in mind also that a lot of lawyers still don't understand this. And so you may want to find a lawyer if you're really thinking about doing this. And I have a lot of artist friends who are, and some of them are making money, some good money actually. But find a lawyer, an IP lawyer. They're called an IP lawyer, I and the letter P. And it's short for intellectual property. These lawyers are very good at digital assets, understanding digital assets and copyright and trademark and all that kind of stuff. And so that's what I would recommend if you're going to find a lawyer to do that. So what are the questions that we still have? I mean, and by the way, y'all ask, speaking of questions, feel free to jump in chat and ask questions all you want. That's what this is about. I want to make sure that y'all have all the answers you need. So what are the questions that are out there? But a copy is as good as the original? Well, kind of. It is. I mean, when you copy, it's not like a Monet, because something digital, I can copy it. And so let's say you have a piece of digital art and I copy it. Yes, it is the exact same digital thing as the original. It is exactly the same. Unlike a Monet, I would have to try to recreate, but even then it wouldn't be the exact same. You see what I'm saying? But digital, you can copy it. So that is one difference between, say, selling a painting or something you can hold in your hand versus selling something that is digital, because I can make 1,000 exact copies. I mean, exact copies of whatever it is you're claiming ownership of. But there's only one owner. In other words, what the NFT does, think of the NFT as not that you actually bought something, is that you have a piece of paper or a license or something that says that you own it. Okay. It's proof that you actually own something. And, you know, for instance, let's say that you found something out there that's really cool and you wanted to make it your profile picture on Facebook. Well, right now, there's nothing stopping you from just grabbing it on the internet and making it a profile pic on your Facebook. But unless that person out there found you on Facebook and sent you a little letter saying, stop, it's my art. And they might do that. But if you went out and bought the NFT for a couple of dollars or $10 or $50, then you could easily do it. And if anyone ever came up to you and said, oh, you're not using that with someone's permission, you can say, yes, I did. Here's my proof. I bought this. I own it. I will display it in my own little personal social media museum. So leave me alone. But what about determining the value of an NFT? This is the crazy part. What is an NFT worth? So far, the most expensive NFT that was sold was by an artist. I believe their name is Beeple, and they sold a digital piece of work for $69 million. That's right, $69 million. And even he was surprised. This guy was very surprised at what it went for. But coming up with the value, it's really, and you'll hear this again later, an NFT is only worth what someone's willing to pay for it. Did you hear me? An NFT is only worth what someone else is willing to pay for it. You don't get to say, my piece of work is worth $8 million. Well, if no one's willing to give you $8 million for it, it ain't worth it. So just remember, other people determine the value, not you. Now, you can put a price on it, and I think you should. Start it out well, and then let the bidding go. So, I mean, there's so many different ways to do it. There's also a thing called residuals, which is kind of cool. Not a lot of people are taking advantage of this, but it's kind of interesting. It's like you create it and you sell it. But keep in mind, once it's sold, other people can resell it. Yeah, and a lot of people are doing that. They're buying NFTs and then reselling them for higher prices and making money. It's almost like an investment. It's almost like a little stock market, if you will. But here's the deal. There's a little thing called residuals. You could actually create the NFT so that you as the creator, the owner, all that, you may sell it. Let's say you sell it for $6. But then someone turns around and sells it for $6 million. You can set it up to where you'll get a percentage of that. Every time it sells, you would get a tiny percentage. And so sometimes, and then it's called a residual. It's kind of like people in Hollywood, they make a movie or they make a TV show, and part of their contract says every time it's shown on TV, they get a $10 or something. That's what a residual is. Every time it's shown, in this case, anytime it's bought or sold, the original person's going to get some money out of it. So it's kind of an interesting thing. It's still very, very, very new, and they're still working through it, but I think it's fascinating. There's a lot of communities building around this. And like I said, this is the Wild West. NFTs are still very Wild West. And there's people out there who are claiming that it is dead. There are people out there claiming that NFTs are over, that it had its little trend climb and then back now. I don't believe that at all. I believe that we did have our honeymoon period where it skyrocketed, went through the ceiling. And now we're trying to find where it's really at, where the values really are. And we're getting more and more people involved in it. And I'll show you some of those in just a minute. This doesn't make a good example though. Pudgy penguins are a big one. Let me explain what I mean by that. People are becoming collectors. And so one of the biggest collector groups out there about NFTs are people who collect pictures of pudgy penguins. I know this sounds so stupid to some of you. I know some of you are laughing and rolling your eyes. But it's kind of like trading cards, okay? They own these NFTs, and that way they can say, this is mine, I own it. And so there are groups, and what they do is they trade pictures back and forth with each other, building up their collections, spending, buying and selling. like I said, it's similar to trading cards, and how kids used to trade them back and forth. And you can trade it. You don't even have to buy these things. You can trade one NFT for another NFT, or this NFT for 5 NFTs, or whatever. I mean, it's really interesting. And a lot of people are really into this. And a lot of people are making money just in trading things. And there's groups for everything. There's even one called Board Gorillas. I don't know how people are coming up with this, but there are a lot out there and the communities are growing. And I'm going to be giving you some sites you can go check some of these out. But seriously, when you get a chance, look up Pudgy Penguins and then add the words NFT, okay, or NFT group. You'll find them, and they're serious about what they do. So who's selling? I mean, we're talking about them like they're trading cards. Who is actually selling them? Well, one of the big ones, believe it or not, is Marvel Comics. Now remember, Marvel Comics is owned by who? Disney, one of the largest entertainment megacorps that exist on planet Earth. Okay, Marvel Comics. Now let me tell you what they're doing. They are making NFTs of the original comic books. Now you know that comic books are big on collectors. They keep them in their Ziploc bags and airtight and all that. But there's only so many of them. So what Marvel's doing is opening it up to other collectors, young people who may not have the actual old comics or even the ability to go somewhere where they sell them. Kids in small towns, they don't have access to comic book stores with rare comics in them. So what Marvel's doing is they're taking those old comic books and they're turning them into a visual version. And they're numbering them. And they're saying, okay, this is the gold level, and maybe there's only 3. And so the pricing will start at this. Then there's the platinum level, the bronze level, blah, blah, blah. They've even got some where they'll only sell 1,000 of them, and they're numbered. That way, there's not 1 million of them out there. That way they retain. But they're selling everything from anywhere from $25 and up. And then people can resell them because they have proof that they own them. It's becoming quite the thing. And Marvel will even give you a free reader software where you can look at your comic book anytime you want. And it's kind of cool because when you actually got an old comic book, remember, in order to look at it, you had to take it out of the wrapper. Ooh, that kind of reduces the value because you're getting all your dirty fingerprints on it. So this is kind of cool, and that it doesn't ever go bad. It doesn't ever get burned up in a fire. It doesn't ever, get moldy and fall apart. The pages all fall out. It doesn't deteriorate. Well, there is one way you can lose it all. If you forget the password to your wallet, it's over. Because remember, I said everything is tied to that wallet. And when you use that wallet, it has a password. And if you forget the password, or if the person who had the password gets hit by a bus and he didn't tell anyone what the password was, it's gone. In fact, there's a story of a guy who had $200 million in cryptocurrency, and he forgot the password to his wallet. Forgot the password. And I think on this particular wallet, you only get like 4 chances, and then it's like locked forever. He's used 3 of them and doesn't know what it is. And he's got 1 more. And if he doesn't get that right, he just lost $200 million. So anyway, remember the password and don't share it with anybody. Although you may want to put it in a safe deposit box in case, like I said, you get hit by a bus so that someone else could get it and you could give it to your kids or something. So Marvel Comics is making some serious money on their NFTs. Wayne Gretzky is too. The sports, oh my gosh, these sports guys are making a killing. And so what Wayne Gretzky is doing, one of the big hockey guys, he is taking some of his videos and some of his, private photos, and he's selling them and making some serious money. A lot of sports people are making a serious amount of money. And the way they're doing it is they're not just selling just one of them. The way they're making their serious money is they're numbering them. They're saying it's a set of 100 or it's a set of 10. So here, Nicole just asked the question, so can you take a picture of your art and sell it as an NFT? Yes, you can take a picture of your own art and sell it. And you can either sell it with the art, in other words, they get both, Or you can sell the physical piece of art separate from the NFT. What I would recommend as an artist, though, if you're a painter, is that you sell the digital version. And if you're going to take a picture of it, you better take a good picture. And I mean high resolution. I mean perfect lighting. Because remember, this is the official one. And then what I would do is I would kind of use, if your stuff is popular, mind you, I would kind of use the Marvel comic book way of doing it. Like maybe you have the gold version, and so there's only 2 of those and they're both signed or something. And then you have the bronze version where it's kind of like, do y'all remember the Thomas Kincaid, the painter of light? Remember how his stuff sold? I mean, his originals were out of, no one could buy those. The originals were too expensive. So what he did was he commissioned a whole bunch of numbered paintings, and that's how they retain their value. That's what I'm talking about here. If your stuff is popular, you may want to consider selling numbered versions of it. And with NFTs, you don't have to recreate them like Thomas Kincaid did. You don't have to hire a bunch of artists to come in there and recreate the paintings, and then he go in there and do the tiny little bits of light. I mean, talk about a lot of work. You can actually sell prints. It's like selling prints, but it's the exact same copy. Okay. So Nicole, I hope that answered your question. Okay. Okay, so selling multiple items by numbering them is the key. Marvel comic books, Wayne Gretzky. I mean, there's some big things happening out there. Now, the rarity affects the value, like I said. So if you're going to have 10,000 of them, then they may only be worth $1 each. But if you do 100 of them, 5 of them, 50 of them, that can affect it. And also, and this is so creepy for me to say this, when you die, your stuff is going to be worth more because there ain't no more coming, okay? And so that's one of the reasons a lot of artists, especially a lot of older artists, are already creating some of these NFTs so that their work lives beyond them. And that way their work can be sold and resold over and over and over again. Okay? But once again, I told you, get with an IP lawyer to make sure you have all your bases covered. If you really want to see how the sports world is doing it, go to autograph.io. This is a website. Not now, not while I'm speaking, that's so rude, but after this presentation. And by the way, you'll be getting this entire presentation. Either you'll be able to click and download it, or my wonderful host will send it to you some way. You'll get them. But anyway, autograph.io. It was started by, guess who? Tom Brady. And what he's done there is he's created like these trading cards, these really 3D cool trading cards for a lot of sports people, famous sports people, and they're getting a piece of the action. And if you really want to see how this works, it's amazing. It really is. Autograph.io, and it's how a lot of these, including like Olympic gymnasts, I mean, it's golfers, it's football players, it's people in just about every sport. And they're selling these, and they look really cool. So it's an amazing site, and you can see how a lot of these big players are actually doing it. Another one is called niftygateway.com. This is another place, and it's primarily for the artist. Okay, Nifty Gateway is primarily for the artist. The artist, she's also a singer, and I love her work. It's very out there. It's very unique. She's young. She used to be with Elon Musk. She was Elon Musk's girlfriend up until like 3 days ago. They broke up. But anyway, she has her own music, and I love her music. But she used it for a lot of her art, and sold it on there and made some serious money on that. Of course, you never know. Maybe Elon bought it. Who knows? But you can sell your art there, and they tell you how to do it. And it can be like bid. You can just put a price on it. It helps you also with the legalities of it. It's a great way to start if you're just starting selling your own stuff. It also has an app that people can download. So for instance, they could hang a tablet on a wall or on their big screen TV. They could display what they actually bought, and it shows at the bottom that it's owned by them. So it's kind of a cool way, because really, you really need to understand the psychology of this. Why would people want to own this? So they can say they own it. It really is. It's the bragging rights. It's the bragging rights of saying, I actually own that. I actually own, the piano playing cat video. I actually own this meme. I actually own this picture. I actually own this piece of this movie, this piece of Top Gun, this tiny little few frames of Top Gun. I mean, it's kind of like, remember, how Disney actually sells cells. Remember, they used to create them on plastic and they put them in frames and sell them at a lot of their Disney stores. They would sell actual cartoon cells, cells, of those. It's the same thing. You can sell pieces of a movie. You can sell anything. So they have the software. It's a great place to start. NiftyGateway.com. If you're wanting to do your own stuff, I would recommend going there, looking what other people are doing and seeing how they're doing it. Another one to really look at if you're an artist and want to know how this works. This is actually the biggest one, and it was the first, but I like how Nifty Gateway does theirs better. But go to OpenSea.io. Okay, OpenSea, SEA.io, not .com, .io. Okay, and it was the first and probably the biggest one out there, and it'll give you an idea on how it works. Now remember, you're going to see some crazy stuff out there. You're going to see a lot of ugly stuff that no one wants to buy. So yes, you're going to see some people's failures. But what I'm saying is you need to just look out there, and it'll give you an idea and help you understand as an artist. Because look at me. If you're an artist, I do see a future in this. I really do. Because it's going to be a way for your art to reach beyond the small little gallery in your hometown. It's going to be a way for you to sell art to someone around the world without you having to ship an expensive frame and all of that. It's easy money if you're an artist. Let me say that again. It's easy money if you're a good artist. Because remember, these are only worth what someone else is willing to pay for it. So the big question is, how do you benefit your business? Because that's kind of what this is about, right? Well, if your business is an artist or a photographer, definitely this is the way to go. Okay, this is definitely a way you need to reach out. And this is how, using the internet, your art, your photos, whatever it is you are creating digitally, you can start making serious money on outside of your geographic location. Because some of you are in some small towns. I'm in Amarillo. We're 200,000 people. That's a small town. Some of you are even smaller towns. And your audience or your potential customer base is limited to those people who might walk into a gallery or walk into your own personal gallery and see it. And so what this does is it kind of gives you the ability to reach beyond that and find people who collect certain pictures. Maybe you're a photographer and you take only pictures of bluebirds. I guarantee there's a group out there who are buying and selling NFTs of bluebirds. And you may not have other bluebird picture collectors in your town, but they exist around the world. There may be only 10 of them in the entire world, but you're going to reach all of them. So if you're an artist, digital artist, or a photographer, or you're taking really good pictures of your paintings, or your sketches or whatever, this is how you can definitely sell them. You can reach new markets, like I said, and reach beyond. You can also, but what if you're another kind of company? I've told you a lot about, in the past, there's a company, and they make blenders, okay? And you remember I told you it's called Will It Blend, and this guy named Tom, who's the owner, who pretends to be a lab guy, a scientist, he sells these very expensive. I mean, some of their blenders are as high as $1,500 for one blender, like a kitchen blender, right? And so he will put everything in those blenders, like tree branches and iPhones, just to show how strong his blender is and that it doesn't jam and it'll eat anything you put in it. So his videos went viral. And so technically, even though what they sell is blenders, he could take his first video and sell it as an NFT. And it would probably sell and do quite well because it's a part of internet history. So if some of your viral content, some of the videos you've created, some of the things you've done in the past on social media are popular and have a lot of Throwback Thursday, have a lot of use to them, believe it or not, even if your business is not in art, is not in photography, you might be able to sell them. Some companies are selling things for charity. Believe it or not, Charmin toilet paper took some of their earlier commercials and sold them as NFTs to raise money for a charity. So you just never know. There's stuff that could be just sitting on your shelf back there doing nothing, making you no money, just almost forgotten by everybody. And you could give it new life again by throwing it out there as an NFT. And if your company just starts getting real big and going crazy, and you never know, it may become worth a lot of money. So how do you start? Where do you start? Well, step one is you got to get a digital wallet. That is step one, because that is how these NFTs work. That is how you're going to buy and sell them. I recommend Coinbase. It's the biggest one out there. It's the one I use. It's also how you can buy and sell Bitcoin, buy and sell Ethereum. You can buy and sell a whole bunch of different cryptocurrencies on there, but it's also how you can buy NFTs and how you can sell NFTs to other people. So what you're going to probably end up doing, most NFTs are still sold under the currency of Ethereum, okay? So what you'll probably do is go buy a little bit of Ethereum with real money. And that's what Coinbase does. It looks at the current value of, say, Ethereum or Bitcoin, and then you can buy some, and then you own actual Ethereum. And then you can actually go out there and buy some NFTs. And when you sell them, you'll get Ethereum back, or you'll get Bitcoin, or whatever it is that they're going to be using in that particular case. But your Coinbase, your wallet is what controls all this. And let me tell you, it's going to ask you to create a password to that, and you better not forget it. I recommend, and you know how I feel about passwords, not writing them down and putting them on sticky notes like on your screen and stuff. You know how I feel about that. But in this case, I would write it down, put it in a sealed envelope, and put it in a safe somewhere, kind of in case of emergency, break glass kind of stuff, because you don't want to lose that. It's that important. And so Coinbase is the way to go. So then you're going to buy some crypto like Ethereum, which is, like I said, the majority of NFTs are bought and sold using Ethereum. But you need to buy a little bit of cryptocurrency in order to do that. And then start visiting some of the sites. Visit some of the sites that I went over, like Nifty Gateway and like OpenSea.io and even Autograph.io. There's a lot of good ones out there. But consider the ramifications of what you're doing. I mean, I'm not going to be here and try to make you sound like you're going to be a millionaire overnight. Not at all. Let's get back to reality, folks. You need to consider the ramifications of this entire market. First, digital assets are just as real assets, okay? That's already been established, because with NFTs, you can prove ownership, okay? They're just as real. It's like a lot of people looked at it this way. They would have a large collection of CDs or cassette tapes. Some of you had 8-track tapes. Can we just, yeah. And you had whole racks of them. And in your mind, you looked at that and said, I own that 8-track tape. I own that CD. I own that cassette tape. Or I own that DVD of that movie, or that VHS tape of that movie. And you could hold it in your hand and say, I own that. Well, guess what? With streaming, we no longer do that anymore, do we? We Netflix this stuff. We stream it. There are no DVDs to say that you own something. By the way, keep in mind, you never really own that movie on a DVD. you own the right to play it. And you own that piece of plastic, but you didn't own the movie. Let's get real. Same with digital assets, okay? You can be just like Netflix, and you can sell people access if you want to have and to look at it, and even ownership of it, and the ability to resell it. Just like in a garage sale, you would resell, some of your old VHS tapes. You would resell some old DVDs or computer games. You can resell it. Now, if you're an artist, you can almost bypass a lot of the galleries and auction houses. You're no longer beholden to them. Oh, if my stuff can't be seen, it'll never get sold. So people who own galleries, they're the ones who are a little nervous about this NFT market. And that's why a lot of them have set up NFT galleries and invited people who don't know how to put up their own gallery to just use theirs, like Nifty Gateway, okay? Like OpenSea. Think of them as online galleries. But what I'm saying is you're no longer beholden to the galleries in your towns. You're no longer beholden to, the limited reach that a physical building, a physical gallery has, or even an auction house, like, the big auction houses. Can't remember, I forgot that one. Sotheby's, yes, thank you. And remember, you don't just have to sell one. I mean, you may have worked for years on one piece of art. No one's saying that you have to sell that one for one price. You can create numbered editions. You can give people levels of access, and like I said, even with like they did with Marvel, so they could make a ton of money. They made like a gold level, like a trading card, a gold level card, and pricing starts at $100. And they made a silver, but they only made like maybe 5 of the golden cards. But then they made like a bronze one, and they made 10,000 of them. So there's more copies, so they're less valuable, but they're easy to buy. So you could do the same with your own art, and you could resell your art over and over and over again and make a ton of money. But once again, if you're good, okay? I mean, I'm not an artist, so you give me some Crayolas and I scratch something out on a piece of paper, take a picture of it, ain't no one gonna buy that, okay? So once again, you don't get to determine if you're good or not. Other people do, but every artist knows that. But people, the most important thing, listen to me, and you've already heard me say this at least 18 times during this video. The most important thing you need to remember is that an NFT's value is based entirely on what someone else is willing to pay for it. This is the purest form of capitalism, okay? Supply and demand. And it is there, you will see a lot. If you go to OpenSea.io, if you go to Nifty Gateway, you're going to see some stuff out there that has zero. It's worth nothing. People determine what it's worth. So just because you put it somewhere doesn't mean you're just going to start raking in the money. You need to push it. You need to social media market it. And I've showed you how to do that. You need to let people know it's out there, and you can even post it. If people copy it, that's one thing, but they don't own it, then you can say you're selling it. And I'm telling you, it really is the way to go. Now, Nicole is also asking, ooh, very good question. Do NFTs cause a heavy carbon footprint? Yes. Now, what does she mean by that? The way blockchain, and it's not the fact that it's an NFT that causes it to use up a lot of electricity. Yes, believe it or not, blockchain uses a lot of electricity. It has a very heavy carbon footprint, which means a lot of electricity has to be generated. Now, why? Because what's happening is computers are having to really crunch some serious, it's all based on computers being able to crunch serious mathematical computations. To do that, computers run hot, and hot computers have to be cooled down. So a lot of energy is spent on these huge supercomputers to be able to calculate this encryption and these equations that are so complicated. These computers get hot, and it takes roomfuls of these, and all that air conditioning that's being used to cool these computers. Yes. So technically, since we are using blockchain for NFTs, yes, it does create a large carbon footprint. Now, there are some blockchain technologies that are coming down that do not use, they're not carbon even, but they're not as stressful on the carbon market or on carbon, well, you know what I mean, carbon footprint. So, but this is still so new. So yes, Nicole asked a great question or made a good point. And if you're very eco-friendly, you would think because it's digital that somehow you're saving no, you're creating a lot of electricity. So you do need to consider that at this point. But I will tell you this, look around, they are coming up with some cryptocurrencies that are not as heavy of a carbon footprint as others. Well, we didn't have as many questions, so we're kind of ending a tiny bit sooner, but I want to leave it open for questions. Now is the time to ask your questions. Anything you want about NFTs. Anything you want at all. Some of y'all are you've probably already turned this off and you're starting to upload your own art, hoping to be a millionaire. I know you. But like I said earlier, I truly believe that NFTs are going to be the way that you can buy and sell digital things like this. I really do. In fact, it's also in games. It's showing up in games like in Fortnite. People can buy and sell virtual stuff using NFTs, like skins and weapons, virtual weapons for games, of course. And there's even people selling virtual real estate. Like they'll create their own world where people can walk around and they're selling virtual real estate for NFTs, and you'll own it forever. You can build a virtual house on your virtual land that you bought, or you can buy other people's land, create a castle. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, the possibilities are unlimited, what NFTs can be used for. So if you have something valuable, if you have something digital that's valuable, something that at some point became viral at some point, got a lot of people would recognize if they saw it, I'm telling you, you could maybe go after NFTs. Any questions at all?
That is so interesting, Eric. I had never heard of these before. So thank you so much for this webinar.
Yeah, no problem. Now, the real question is, here's a little test. I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you remember what NFT stands for?
Oh, wait, I knew you were gonna ask me. Non-fungible token. There we go.
You get it, girl. You get it, girl. That is so, you got it. That is perfect.
No more questions though.
You can impress people at parties now.
Also wanted to remind you guys that we're going to have Eric again on Friday. That webinar is titled How to Manage Your Online Reputation for Free. I'm going to go ahead and chat that through in case you want to register for that. And yeah, don't be shy to ask questions. We love questions. And in the meantime, just wanted to remind you to reach out to the NMSBDC. We are here to help you during any stage of your business, so don't hesitate to contact us. And more so than anything, please visit our website at nmsbdc.org to view our upcoming no-cost webinars or to sign up for counseling services. I will email you the slides of this presentation and all those links probably sometime tomorrow. So just be on the lookout for that. And then yeah, Eric, I guess since we don't have any questions, are there any last words that do we have a question? We have a thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Are there any last words on your end?
Yeah, here's the deal. NFTs are still so new. So chances are most of the people in your industry really don't know that much about it, or it's only hearsay. So like I said, the more research you do, you're going to be the first one into them, which means you're probably going to be the one who benefits the most from them. Okay. A lot of times he who is first wins first, whereas the last artist to finally get into it won't make as much. So if you have a large collection of artwork, you really may want to consider getting some really good professional shots taken of it. And that way it'll live forever. And you might be able to open up your own gallery, your own virtual gallery, and just sell the hell out of it.
And we've got another comment here. Thanks for this novelty. And we've actually got a question. Why aren't they on any other blockchain?
They're starting to show up on some others. Ethereum was the first one because I actually had to adjust the Ethereum blockchain to be able to handle showing ownership. So it actually changed it. But there are other blockchains that are starting to do it in it, handle NFTs as well. But Ethereum still is the big one out there. But once you start, it's going to grow and it's going to get standards like anything else. And it's just, I'm telling you, if you go to autograph.io, the one Tom Brady started, well, he didn't start it. Obviously, he's probably just an investor and some tech guy started it, but you'll see the future of it. That, to me, that's the best example of kind of where it's going. Autograph.io.
Autograph.io. I will definitely have to check that one out. Well, thank you so much, Eric, as always, such a pleasure. And thank you all for your attendance. And I guess if we don't have any other questions, we can wrap this one up.